Hello there YouTube, welcome to Showcase Watches. Today discussing reissue watches and are they a good thing, are they a bad thing, and who are the people who buys these watches. So today I am wearing the Omega Speedmaster Professional with the 1861 movement, manual wind, Hesalite glass, the traditional Speedmaster. And we're discussing, I'm going to use this particular watch. This is the 1957 reissue of the Omega Seamaster 300. And this is a 39mm watch with the caliber 8806, the in-house coaxial movement. And the reason I thought I'd do this video is a lot of people do email me asking about vintage watches and what would my advice to them be if they were looking to purchase a vintage or are they looking to purchase modern. And I've gone back to these people and I've said you can buy something in the middle. You don't have to go vintage, you don't have to go modern. You can buy the middle ground. Now, if you were to take something like this one, this is my 16750 Rolex GMT Master from 1988. Now this watch is it's not the it's an acrylic crystal, so it's not the sapphire crystal, so it will scratch easier. The bezel is aluminium, so it will mark. It does patina. The dial is original. The indices are original. The glass is original, and as is the bezel. The only thing that's not original on this watch is actually the hands. The hands have been replaced, and it's the original bracelet, the original clasp. The entire watch is, it's an original piece. Now, the problem with this watch is if you wear this for daily use, which you can do, it's 100 meter water resistance, it has been serviced, so there's no reason why you can't wear this as a daily watch. The problem with wearing this as a daily watch is any marks, any dents, any scrapes, any accidents you happen to have with this watch will take away from the originality, and it will ultimately take away from the collectability and the value. So then people say to me, oh, well, why don't I purchase, something along the modern line, which, you could go for the modern GMT, which is in my case, it's the Batman. Now, the problem with this one, they lack any charm at all. Modern Rolex have no charm, in my opinion. I'm sure there's lots of people watching this who think Rolex have got full of charm. But what I'm talking about is when you go something vintage like this one, the Pepsi, it's full of charm, it's full of character, it's full of history, and it's a true icon. You go for the modern, it's perfection. It is perfect in every way. The technology, the quality, everything is there. You can wear this watch as a daily watch. You can wear this watch as a special occasion watch. It is the perfect modern watch. The problem is it lacks the character. This has the character, this doesn't, in my opinion. So there is a middle ground. So I'll bring this one into shot. Now this is the Omega Seamaster 300, as I mentioned before, a 1957 reissue released in 2017 as a limited edition anniversary piece, powered by the 8806 movement. Now with this watch, you've got the classic aesthetics. You've got 39mm in diameter. You've got 19mm between the lugs. You've got the domed sapphire crystal. Obviously, this would have been a domed plexiglass at one point, but they've used the sapphire crystal. You've got the 300 meters water resistance. The original was actually only 200 meters water resistance. It was called the Omega Seamaster 300, but it was only water resistant down to 200 meters. This is 300. So you've got the vintage vibe. You've got the vintage bracelet. You've got the vintage clasp. You've got the vintage aesthetic. You've got the bidirectional rotating bezel. Again, all vintage inspired with the aluminium insert. You've got the tropical dial, which is very much vintage-esque. It is faux patinaed, which isn't to everybody's liking, but most people who appreciate this watch love the faux patina on this. Personally, it could have done to have been one shade lighter, but it's not so. To me, the camera does it no favours. It looks a lot better in person, but it could have done to have been one tone lighter on the faux patina. That's a small criticism, but it's not enough for me not to purchase the watch. I do love this watch. So you've got all the vintage charm. The vintage vibe is there, the vintage charm is there. But inside here, you've got the 8806 in-house Omega movement, the coaxial movement, which is anti-magnetic to 15,000 Gauss. It's 300 meters water resistance. It is a vintage style bracelet, but with the modern build quality and the screw adjustment. So you can just undo the screws, and it's easy to adjust. It's easy to adjust the bracelet, unlike the pins, which are on the earlier models, especially the earlier Omegas. Obviously, Rolex have been doing screws for a long time. And this watch is a 1988, and you can see this has got screws in. So Rolex have been ahead of the game for some time doing the screws, but Omega were a little bit slow to follow suit. So with this one, you've got the screws, so it's easy to adjust. You've got the micro adjustment. You push this little button in here. It extends the clasp, so that if you are on a particularly warm day and as your wrist swells, or if you're doing any activity and your wrist swells, you just push that button and you just get that little bit of micro adjustment, just so you've got that little bit of adjustment on the fly, which is it's a really useful feature to have. Something that a vintage watch would not have had. You would have had just I'll show it better on the. I'll probably show it better on the Rolex actually. You can see here you've just got the increment adjustments where you've got to use a pin and you've got to put it in and you've got to adjust it. Not really something you'd want to be doing on the fly. Whereas with the Omega, you just press that button, adjust it, and it's, whether your wrist swells or contracts, you just press that button and adjust it on the fly. Really, really useful feature, but housed in a vintage clasp. So you've got all the vintage charm there, but with modern technology. And same can be said for the case itself. So this is very, very much a vintage style. It's before they had the turned lugs. So you can see here on the Omega, they have the turned lugs, whereas on here they have the straight. And this is where Omega, so this was the original Seamaster. This gave birth to the Seamaster as we know it. You can't see many similarities between the two watches today, but this watch gets its heritage and its roots from this watch. So there are some similarities, but very little in terms of today's Seamaster. You can probably see more of the Seamaster 300 DNA in the Planet Ocean range than you can in the actual Seamaster. So yeah, you've got modern technology inside with the 8806 movement. You've got the vintage vibe, you've got the vintage aesthetic, but you've got the wearability of a modern watch. So you can wear this for every eventuality. You can wear this as a daily watch, 100% confident of it being able to take a beating, of it being able to take daily use and not be worried. If you were to scratch this bezel, if you were to shatter the sapphire, if you were to damage the watch in any way, shape or form, you can send it back to Omega, they'll fix it. It doesn't affect the collectability or the value of the watch. When you've got a true vintage piece, and for instance on this one, if this was to be serviced, it would come back with a service dial, and at the 6 o'clock position on the service dial it just says the word Swiss instead of the tritium at the bottom. So that would massively affect the value and the collectability of this watch. If that dial said Swiss, it would massively affect the value of the watch, and it would affect the desirability of the watch to collectors. Whereas when you've got something like this, if you replace this dial for whatever reason, it doesn't matter. Omega will have these in stock, they can replace it. So you've got all the vintage charm, but you've got the wearability and you've got the flexibility of a modern piece. And that's the beauty of these reissue models. Are they for everybody? Probably not. I know loads of people who would jump at a Rolex Submariner, the ceramic Rolex Submariner, the modern heavy hitter. This is the daddy of the dive watch industry, of the dive watch genre. People would fall over themselves to get this watch, but Some people with a little bit more of imagination might prefer this one because they've got the vintage vibe, they've got the character with the modern, the modern technology, the modern build quality. And it is the modern build quality. The bracelets are better. The cases are better machined, they're better made. The bezel's better made. The materials used in the watch, the sapphire crystal as opposed to the acrylic crystal. The in-house caliber 8806 as opposed to the ETA or the off-the-shelf movements which they were using back in the day. This is everything in-house. This is Omega at its finest. This is Omega celebrating their day of, well, I suppose you can say the day of when Omega was great. I mean, they're a great brand now, but they were a brand that innovated. They were just such an exciting brand back in the 1950s, 60s, 70s. Granted, when the quartz crisis hit, it did affect them massively, and they went into a very, very difficult time. They sort of rekindled themselves back in the mid-90s with the relationship with the Bond era, to be fair. When Bond started wearing the Omega, it saved the brand. In my opinion, it saved the brand. Obviously, they've always had the link to NASA, which is another big trumps for Omega. But this watch harps back to the day when all watches were special. Go back to the 1960s when the 1675 GMT Master was on the go. And they were, Rolex were in cahoots with Pan Am, making watches for the pilots, when they were making the Rolex Submariners as actual tool watches. This was a grand era for the mechanical watch, and that is where this watch was born. And that's the only way I can describe it, is that it was the grand era for the mechanical watch. Today, it's taken for granted. Mechanical watches cost, thousands upon thousands of pounds, whereas back in the day, everyone expected a mechanical watch. Quartz watches wasn't a thing. They expected it to be, a manually wound piece that had an automatic movement, or they expected it to be, in this case, a manually wound piece that had to be wound every day or two to keep it going. This is charm. This is when wristwatches were a thing of beauty, and that's what they were. They were a thing of beauty. And when you look at them today, you look at the vintage compared to the modern, there just isn't the same feeling, I would say, that goes into them. They are almost too modern, and the same can be said about a lot of things in today's industry. Look at the old cars. If you look at some of the old classic cars, they have character. They're packed with character and design features. Look at the modern cars, and yes, they're nice and they're reliable and everything else, but they're not. They don't have the same character and the same charm as what they did back in the day. And that is where these reissue watches come into their own. They straddle the two. They're vintage aesthetic, but with modern tech, and with the modern abilities, but with the vintage charm. So tell me what you guys think. Do you like vintage watches? Do you like modern watches? Or are you like me and like the full range? I mean, I own modern, I own vintage, and I own the ones that straddle the two. Very, very similar things can be said about this watch, which is my Omega Seamaster Professional. This is the 2220, famously worn by Daniel Craig in Casino Royale. Now, this watch is vintage-ish. It'll come into its own at some point. It's got the vintage bracelet, obviously no screws. It's got no micro adjustment. It has got diver's deployment clasp on it. It's got the aluminium bezel. It's got the old-fashioned wave dial, but inside is the caliber 2500, a coaxial movement. So this was a transitional model. This is the model that, as they were going out of the classic case, the classic aluminium bezel, the classic bracelet, when they were going away from this and going into the ceramic era, this is the transitional model when they had the applied indices, the applied logo, the caliber 2500 movement. This was straddling vintage and modern, which is one of the reasons I love this watch. and the fact it was on the wrist of Daniel Craig in the Skyfall movie. Of my collection, this is the one that I classify as my Bond watch. I dislike the Bond watches that say 007 on the dial, or when they've got on the case back it's got 007 and numbers, and I don't like that. Personally, I would much rather have the watch unmolested. It's just as it is. This is as it was when he wore it in the movie. You can be damn sure that Daniel Craig wouldn't wear a watch that said 007 across the dial. So yeah, so let me know what you guys think. Do you agree with this? Do you oppose it? What's your views? I really am interested. I do read your comments. I might not comment, comment on every single one of them, but I do read every comment to get a grasp of what you guys think. And everything that you tell me expands my knowledge. In the same way, I hope that everything I tell you might expand yours, or at least stir a healthy debate. So let me know what you guys think. This is Showcase Watches. Do check out my other videos, like and subscribe to the channel, and do all the usual stuff. And don't forget, leave me a comment, let me know what you guys think. Take care, and I will catch you in the next one.